The night my husband left me to die, I actually apologized to him. That's the part that still makes me sick. I was lying on a stiff gurney under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry insects, trying to breathe through the crushing weight in my chest. The air smelled like bleach and something metallic, like blood that had been wiped away but never really gone. My hospital gown barely covered me, and every time I shifted, the paper sheet crinkled like I was trash being unwrapped. "Ma'am, we need payment confirmation now." The woman at the foot of my bed didn't even look at my face. She stared at her tablet. At the numbers. At the fact that my insurance card had just been declined. My husband stood beside me, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Valerie," he sighed, like I'd asked him for a favor instead of life support. "You know things have been tight." Tight. 2 hours earlier, he'd promised he'd figure something out. He said he'd call a lender. He said he'd sell his watch. He said a lot of things. The clerk cleared her throat. "If the deposit isn't paid within 30 minutes, we'll need to free this bed for another patient." Free the bed. Not discharge the patient. Not transfer her safely. Just free the bed. I turned my head toward David. Even through the blur in my vision, I noticed something stupidly small. His shirt was perfectly pressed. His hair was styled. He smelled like cologne. The expensive one he only wore to important meetings. "Please," I whispered. "I'm scared." He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and it felt empty. Like a formality. "I'll be right back," he said. "I'll get the money. I promise." His phone lit up as he turned away. I caught a glimpse of a text notification before he angled the screen away from me. Then he walked out. And that was the last time I saw my husband as my husband. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. My calls went straight to voicemail. The nurse came back, this time with 2 security guards. "I'm sorry," she said, except she didn't sound sorry at all. "We can't hold the bed." They rolled my gurney out of the ER and into a drafty hallway near the exit. People walking by stared. Some pitied me. Some looked annoyed. I'd never felt so disposable in my life. That's when it hit me. He wasn't coming back. David didn't leave to get money. He left to get rid of me. The realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt cold. Quiet. Like the moment you realize you've been standing in the rain too long and now you're numb. My vision started to blur at the edges. I remember thinking, so this is how it ends. Not in some tragic accident. Not in a movie-worthy way. Just, abandoned. Then the atmosphere shifted. You ever feel a room change without knowing why? The hallway noise softened. Footsteps echoed differently. Conversations hushed. I forced my eyes open. 5 men in tailored black suits walked through the entrance like they owned the building. People moved out of their way automatically. In the center was a middle-aged man with silver at his temples and eyes that scanned the room like he was searching for something precious. He stopped in front of my gurney. And then, this powerful, perfectly dressed stranger dropped to his knees beside me. He took my 4-bruised hand in both of his. His shoulders shook. "Forgive me," he whispered. I stared at him, barely conscious. "Who are you?" His voice broke when he answered. "My name is Harrison. And I have been looking for you for 25 years. Before I could process that, he turned his head sharply and barked orders at the hospital director who had come running. "Prepare the penthouse suite. Call every specialist you have. If she receives anything less than elite care, this facility will answer to me personally." Then he looked back at me. And said the words that split my world open a second time. "Miss Hayes, your husband didn't just abandon you. He tightened his grip on my hand. He stole something that was yours from the day you were born." And I realized my nightmare wasn't ending. It was just beginning. When I woke up, I thought I'd died. The ceiling above me wasn't hospital white. It was cream, trimmed with intricate molding and a crystal chandelier that scattered soft golden light across the room. The air didn't smell like disinfectant anymore. It smelled like lilies and lavender. My body sank into the mattress beneath me. It wasn't the thin ER pad that dug into my spine. This bed felt expensive. Like it was designed to cradle someone important. For a split second, I wondered if this was heaven. Then I felt the oxygen cannula under my nose and the 4 taped to my arm. Still alive. You're safe, a deep voice said gently. I turned my head slowly. Harrison stood by a massive window overlooking the city skyline. The morning sun reflected off the glass towers outside. He wasn't crying anymore, but there was something in his expression, guilt, maybe. Or relief. Where am I? My throat felt raw, but breathing didn't hurt as much. The executive floor, he replied. Reserved for the founding family. I blinked. You have the wrong person. He didn't smile. Didn't argue. Instead, he walked over and placed a thick leather folder on my lap. Please, he said softly. Look. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a faded photo of a newborn baby. A crescent-shaped birthmark curved along the infant's left shoulder. I had that exact mark. My stomach twisted. Beneath the photo was a DNA report dated 3 years ago. 3 years. My vision sharpened. Applicant, David Chen. My husband's name. My pulse roared in my ears. What is this? Harrison's jaw tightened. 3 years ago, your husband discovered irregularities in your foster care records. He secretly collected a DNA sample from you and submitted it to our missing heirs database. The room felt smaller. You're telling me, I whispered, David knew something about me I didn't? Harrison nodded once. 25 years ago, a group of infants were kidnapped from this hospital. You were one of them. Your grandfather, the chairman of Sterling Medical Group, searched for you until his death last month. Grandfather? Chairman? I grew up bouncing between foster homes and state facilities. I'd been told my parents were nobodies. That I came from nothing. David used to remind me of that whenever we fought. No roots, he'd say. That's why you bring bad luck. My chest tightened, but not from illness this time. From rage. If the heir was never found, Harrison continued, the corporation's assets would remain frozen. But if the heir was located deceased, her legal spouse would qualify for a humanitarian compensation payout. My breath stopped. How much? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Several million. The words echoed in the space between us. All at once, every memory rearranged itself. David refusing to take me to specialists. David insisting over-the-counter medicine was good enough. David pushing me to drink that herbal tonic every night. David yelling that I was a financial burden. He wasn't frustrated. He was waiting. I felt something inside me snap into focus. And the text message? I asked. In the ER. Who was texting him? Harrison picked up a tablet from the side table and tapped the screen. A video filled the wall-mounted display. Hospital parking garage. David walking calmly to his car. A young woman in a tight red dress opened the passenger door. They kissed. Not a quick peck. Not comfort. Passion. My husband, who had just left me to borrow money, got into the car and drove away laughing. I didn't cry. That's the weird part. I expected to break. Instead, something cold and razor-sharp formed behind my ribs. Her name is Ashley, Harrison said. His secretary. He was never fired. He was promoted. Of course he was. Does he think I'm dead? I asked quietly. Harrison met my eyes. Yes. Silence settled between us. For 5 years, I loved that man. I defended him when his mother called me useless. I believed him when he said I was lucky he married me. I shrank myself so he'd feel bigger. And he left me in a hallway to die for money. I looked down at my hands resting on silk sheets. They don't know I'm alive, I murmured. No, Harrison replied. A slow realization spread through me. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't dependent on David's paycheck or approval. If what Harrison was saying was true, everything he tried to take from me was already mine. I lifted my eyes to Harrison. How much control do I have? All of it, he said. Something inside me shifted permanently. The woman who begged in a hospital hallway felt very far away. Then stop calling me miss, I said, my voice steady for the first time in months. Help me recover. Harrison inclined his head. And after that? He asked carefully. I stared out at the city skyline. After that, I said, I want to watch my husband realize he buried the wrong woman. And that was the moment I stopped being a victim. Recovery felt surreal. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been rationing soup so David wouldn't complain about grocery costs. Now I was being monitored by specialists flown in from 3 different countries. The penthouse floor had its own surgical wing, private nurses, and a nutritionist who looked personally offended that I'd ever been malnourished. Every morning, sunlight filtered through silk curtains instead of leaking through cracked blinds. Instead of debt collectors pounding on metal doors, I woke to quiet knocks and trays of fresh fruit, herbal tea, and protein broth. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. But the biggest shock wasn't the luxury. It was the diagnosis. The organ damage is reversible, the lead physician explained carefully, tablet in hand. But there's something else. I sat upright in the hospital-grade recliner, now strong enough to hold my own weight. What kind of something else? I asked. He hesitated. We detected abnormal toxin levels. The word toxin didn't fully register. Like, pollution? I asked weakly. No, his expression turned clinical. Arsenic. The room went silent. I stared at him. That's rat poison. Yes. The explanation came calmly, methodically. Small doses. Daily exposure. Symptoms mimicking chronic illness. Gradual organ damage. No obvious trace unless specifically tested for. I felt my hands go cold. For how long? I asked. Based on hair and tissue samples, approximately 6 months. 6 months. Exactly when my mystery illness began. Memories flooded me like someone had kicked open a door in my mind. David standing in our tiny kitchen. Drink this, Valerie. It'll help your kidneys. The bitter aftertaste I tried not to complain about. The way he watched me finish every drop. The way he'd get irritated if I said I wasn't hungry. I pressed my fingers to my mouth. He wanted it to look natural, the doctor continued. Slow decline. No autopsy suspicion. My stomach lurched. David hadn't just abandoned me. He'd been poisoning me. On purpose. 4 months. The room tilted slightly, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something worse than heartbreak. Clarity. Harrison stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. I could see the fury in his posture. Is there evidence? I asked. Yes, the doctor said. If we recover the source. The source. The glass jar. The herbal powder David kept hidden in the top cabinet, wrapped in plastic like it was gold. My pulse spiked. It's still in our apartment, I said. Harrison stepped forward immediately. We'll retrieve it. No, I replied. He paused. I'm going. Chairwoman. I'm going, I repeated, firmer. I needed to see it. I needed to stand in that kitchen and understand how close I'd come to dying in that room while he slept peacefully beside me. An hour later, I was sitting in the back of a black sedan, dressed in neutral clothes, oversized sunglasses covering half my face. The alley leading to our old rental apartment looked exactly the same. Trash bags piled against cracked walls. Rusted gates. The smell of sewage and fried food hanging in the air. For a second, I felt like I was slipping backward in time. But then I remembered the penthouse. The inheritance. The truth. I wasn't the same woman who left here in an ambulance. We entered quietly. The landlord hadn't changed the lock yet. The apartment smelled stale and damp. My clothes were thrown on the floor. Drawers pulled open. He'd already searched for valuables. Of course he had. I walked straight to the kitchen cabinet. My hand shook as I opened it. Empty. My heart dropped. He took it, I whispered. Then Harrison pointed toward the overturned trash can near the sink. Glass shards. White yellow powder clumped against garbage wrappers. I knelt without thinking, ignoring the filth on the tile. Using a handkerchief, I carefully gathered what remained. This is it, I breathed. Proof. Attempted murder. Just as I stood up, a motorcycle engine roared outside. My blood froze. David's motorcycle. Footsteps approached the door. Harrison grabbed my arm and pulled me into the narrow bathroom just as the front door creaked open. I held my breath in the dark. David walked in whistling. Whistling. Damn shack, he muttered. Good thing I'm done with this place. My fingers dug into my palms so hard I felt my nails break skin. He rummaged around, looking for something. Swore under his breath. Then his phone rang. Yeah, he snapped. What do you mean the site needs more materials? I already wired the money. I'm not some grunt anymore, I'm a CEO. CEO. With my money. My inheritance. He found what he needed, grabbed a key from the wall, and left as casually as he'd entered. The motorcycle roared away. I exhaled slowly. In my hand was the poison powder. In my chest was something darker than pain. It wasn't just revenge I wanted anymore. It was justice. And now? I had evidence. But I didn't know yet that David was about to panic. And a desperate man? Is far more dangerous than a greedy one. By the time we got back to the penthouse, the powder was already on its way to a private forensic lab. Chain of custody documented. Independent verification requested. No room for technical loopholes. If David thought he could wiggle out of this, he was about to learn I wasn't the same woman he manipulated in that cramped kitchen. I didn't change out of my stained clothes right away. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in my suite, staring at myself. 2 weeks ago, I'd looked hollow. Gray. Small. Now my cheeks had color. My posture had changed. My eyes didn't look scared anymore. They looked sharp. Chairwoman, Harrison said gently from behind me, the funds have been transferred to Mr. Chen's development company as agreed. Phase 1. I had invested $10 million into David's real estate startup under the identity of Regina Hale, reclusive investor, newly liquid, rumored to be ruthless. He never once recognized me. That still amazed me. Apparently, confidence and decent skincare can do miracles. How's the project status? I asked. Construction materials purchased. Heavy equipment leased. Workers hired. He's committed almost all the capital already. Perfect. And the permit issue? Harrison gave a thin smile. The city planning department discovered an unresolved land boundary dispute. The project is suspended pending investigation. Meaning? Everything stalls. Money bleeds. Penalties trigger. I walked to the desk and picked up the prepaid phone we'd set aside for anonymous contact. Time for a little psychological seasoning. I typed slowly. That herbal tonic you made me every night? Delicious. Too bad the jar broke in the kitchen. Don't worry, I saved what was left. I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds. Then I hit send. Across town, David was probably sitting in his glass-walled rental office, feeling untouchable. He thought I was dead. He thought he'd secured 10 million from some wealthy idiot. He thought he was free. The phone buzzed almost immediately. Unknown number, who is this? I smiled. Then sent the photo Harrison had taken in the kitchen. The yellow powder on white cloth. The cracked tile floor unmistakable in the background. Beneath it, just 5 words. Your wife says hello. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. No response. He didn't know what to say. I imagined him going pale. Imagined the sweat forming at his hairline. Good. An hour later, Harrison walked in with an update. Chairwoman. Mr. Chen has received official notice. His project is frozen. Right on schedule. I pictured his reaction, the way his temper flared when the Wi-Fi cut out for 5 minutes. Multiply that by $10 million. He won't be able to return the capital, Harrison continued. Most of it has been spent. And the contract? If the project fails within 6 months, all personal and future assets transfer to us. Including life insurance payouts. There it was. The trap. He signed it thinking my insurance money would bail him out. He never imagined I'd be the one collecting. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, this isn't funny. What do you want? I typed back one line. Tick-tock. Then I turned the phone off. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared. Because I was remembering. David used to sit at the edge of our bed scrolling through his phone while I washed dishes. I'd ask who he was texting. Work stuff, he'd snap. I used to apologize for asking. I used to feel guilty for needing reassurance. Now I understood something clearly. He didn't marry me because he loved me. He married me because I was easy to control. Poor girl. No family. No safety net. Perfect insurance policy. I walked out onto the balcony and looked at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, he was spiraling. I should have felt sad. 5 years of memories don't evaporate overnight. But the sadness had burned away, replaced with something clean and focused. Resolve. Harrison stepped quietly beside me. He's at the hospital right now, he said. I turned. Doing what? Demanding your death certificate. A slow smile spread across my face. Oh, I said softly. He's panicking. And tomorrow morning? I would be waiting for him in my office. As Regina. Ready to squeeze. The rain that afternoon felt cinematic. Sheets of water poured over the hospital entrance as if the universe wanted dramatic lighting for David's meltdown. Harrison had eyes inside the building, and I watched everything unfold through live security feeds from my office. David looked unhinged. His hair, usually slicked back with ridiculous care, was plastered to his forehead. His shirt clung to him. His eyes were bloodshot, darting like an animal cornered in a trap. My wife died here, he shouted at the front desk. The nurse behind the counter looked terrified. There is no deceased patient by that name, she repeated, voice trembling. No record of admission or discharge. He slammed his palm against the marble counter. Check again. The irony almost made me laugh. He had left me in a hallway like garbage. Now he was begging for proof of my death. Security dragged him outside when he grabbed the nurse's collar. The image of him thrown into a puddle in the parking lot? Priceless. But what interested me more wasn't the humiliation. It was the fear. He was terrified. Because if there was no death record, then I was alive. And if I was alive? The arsenic trail wasn't buried. My office phone rang. Chairwoman, Harrison said calmly. Mr. Chen is spiraling. I want him desperate, I replied. You may get more than that. What do you mean? There was a pause. Our surveillance shows he purchased a tactical folding knife 2 days ago. My fingers stilled on the desk. Why? We believe he intends to confront you at tomorrow night's gala. The acquisition gala. The one I scheduled intentionally at the newly purchased Zenith building. The same club where he toasted to my death. He'd been invited as an investor. His ego wouldn't let him decline. He thinks if I disappear, I said slowly, the contract chaos might buy him time. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. A week ago, that information would have terrified me. Now? It clarified things. Enhance security, I ordered. But don't block him. Harrison's tone sharpened. Chairwoman, that's dangerous. I know. Silence. I want him close, I said. Close enough to see my face. There are different types of revenge. Financial ruin is satisfying. Public humiliation is powerful. But revelation? That's nuclear. I didn't just want David arrested. I wanted him to understand. To see. To feel the exact second his world collapsed. Later that evening, I stood in front of the mirror in my dressing suite. A stylist pinned my hair into a sleek updo. A gold evening gown hugged my body perfectly. Diamonds rested at my throat, subtle but unmistakably expensive. The woman in the mirror didn't look like the girl who used to ration rice. She looked untouchable. Security layout? I asked Harrison. Plainclothes officers throughout the ballroom. Uniformed police on standby. Forensic evidence prepared. Audio recording queued. Good. Because tomorrow night, I wasn't just hosting a celebration. I was staging a reckoning. Meanwhile, across town, David sat in his car outside a liquor store, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked like hell. His phone buzzed again. A reminder from my legal team. Payment of $12 million due tomorrow at 9 a.m. He smashed the steering wheel with his fist. He had less than $50,000 left. The rest? Burned through like gasoline. Office lease. Sports car down payment. Jewelry for Ashley. Ashley. He called her immediately. She didn't answer. Because while he was unraveling, she was already being questioned by investigators about deleted company files. He didn't know that yet. He just knew he was drowning. And drowning men? They make reckless choices. He opened the glove compartment. The knife glinted under the dim car light. You think you can ruin me? He muttered. He pictured Regina standing tall in her golden dress. He didn't see Valerie. He saw an obstacle. If you die, he whispered, gripping the handle, the contract dies with you. He started the engine. Rain streaked across his windshield like veins. Back in my penthouse, I closed my eyes and imagined the ballroom. The orchestra. The lights. The moment his blade would flash. And the moment I would step forward without flinching. Because tomorrow night? David wouldn't be hunting anyone. He'd be walking straight into the cage I built. And I'd be holding the lock. The gala looked like something out of a billionaire's fantasy. Crystal chandeliers shimmered over a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. Champagne glasses clinked. A live orchestra played soft jazz near the stage. Cameras flashed as reporters documented the mysterious investor who had just acquired Zenith and half the surrounding block. Me. I stood at the top of the grand staircase in a gold evening gown that felt like liquid metal against my skin. My hair was pinned high, diamonds resting at my collarbone. Every step I took echoed softly against marble. No one saw Valerie Hayes. They saw Regina Hale. Powerful. Untouchable. But under the silken diamonds, my pulse beat steady and controlled. Security in position, Harrison murmured through the discreet earpiece. And him? I asked quietly. He just entered. I didn't look immediately. I didn't need to. I could feel it. That shift in the air. That faint ripple of tension when someone unstable walks into a room. When I finally let my gaze drift across the crowd, I spotted him. David. His tuxedo fit poorly. His jaw was tight. Sweat glistened along his temple despite the cool air. His right hand stayed buried in his jacket pocket. Knife. He was scanning the room for me. Good. The orchestra softened as the spotlight shifted toward the stage. I walked up calmly, heels steady against polished wood. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice amplified and smooth, thank you for joining me tonight. Applause rippled politely. Tonight isn't just about acquisition. It's about truth. I saw David stiffen. He started pushing through the crowd, getting closer to the stage. His movements were sharp, impatient. 3 steps away. 10 feet. 5. Before we toast, I continued, I'd like to invite one of my newest investors up here. The spotlight swept across the room and landed directly on him. Mr. David Chen, I said clearly. Would you join me? 100 heads turned. David froze. This wasn't part of his plan. But his ego wouldn't let him refuse. He forced a tight smile and climbed the steps. Up close, I could see the madness in his eyes. The sleepless panic. The flicker of rage. You're playing games, he muttered under his breath. I smiled slightly. Am I? Then I snapped my fingers. The giant screen behind us lit up. Not with stock projections. With audio. His voice filled the ballroom speakers. Of course she's dead. You think she could have survived? Her kidneys were shot. I turned off my phone so they couldn't bill me for body disposal fees. The music stopped. The room fell silent. You could hear the air conditioning hum. David's face drained of color. What is this? He hissed. The recording continued. To Valerie. After making my life hell for 5 years, may she rest in hell. Gasps spread through the crowd. Phones lifted. Cameras zoomed. You set me up. David roared. And then? He pulled the knife. The blade flashed under chandelier light. Women screamed. He lunged. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Just before the knife reached me, a powerful hand twisted his wrist. A sickening crack echoed as Harrison forced him to his knees. The knife clattered across the stage. Security flooded in. David screamed in pain. I stepped forward slowly. Bent down. Removed the diamond hairpin holding my updo. My hair fell around my shoulders. Then I took a cleansing wipe from Harrison's hand and wiped away the contour from my cheek. The small mole under my eye appeared. His favorite feature. Look at me, I said quietly. His breathing stuttered. Valerie, he whispered. I let my voice soften, just enough. I'm not a ghost, I said. I'm the wife you poisoned. The ballroom erupted into stunned whispers. David's entire body shook. That's impossible, he muttered. You were dying. Yes, I replied calmly. From arsenic. Police officers entered through the main doors right on cue. Behind them, a forensic tech held up a sealed evidence bag. Inside? The broken glass jar. With residue. Documented. Tested. Matched. David looked like he might pass out. You tried to kill me slowly, I continued softly. But you rushed the ending. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Reporters surged forward. Flashbulbs exploded. He looked up at me with desperate, watery eyes. Valerie, please, he choked. I panicked. We were broke. I did it for us. For us? I echoed. I leaned closer. You called me a burden while poisoning my tea. His lips trembled. I loved you, he whispered. I held his gaze. No, I said calmly. You loved what you thought I was worth. They dragged him off stage. The crowd parted like he carried infection. And as the ballroom slowly filled with applause, loud, thunderous, stunned applause, I realized something. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was liberation. But the night wasn't over. Because as David was forced through the doors in handcuffs, he turned his head and smiled. Not broken. Not defeated. Calculated. And that smile? Told me he still believed he had one final move left. That smile haunted me. Not because I was afraid of him anymore, but because I knew David. He didn't smile unless he thought he still had leverage. Even in handcuffs. Even humiliated in front of half the city. He thought he had something. The ballroom slowly emptied after the arrest. Reporters were escorted out. Investors whispered in tight circles. Damage control teams moved like quiet ants, smoothing over the spectacle. Harrison approached me as I stepped off stage. Police are transporting him downtown, he said. Attempted assault, attempted murder, financial fraud. Bail will be extremely difficult. Good, I replied. But my mind wasn't on the charges. It was on that smile. What's left that he thinks he can use? I asked quietly. Harrison frowned. We've frozen his accounts. Seized business assets. Ashley is in custody. Digital backup secured. Insurance? Invalidated. Fraud investigation opened. Family? Harrison paused. His mother. Of course. David's mother had hated me from the day we got married. She'd called me background noise. Said I had no pedigree. No value. And she adored David in a way that felt obsessive. Is she financially tied to anything? I asked. Joint ownership of an older property. And, Harrison scrolled through his tablet, she is the beneficiary of a secondary offshore account. I turned sharply. Offshore? Yes. How much? Approximately 1.8 million. I went still. That wasn't random savings. That was backup. He moved money before the investment, I murmured. Harrison nodded slowly. He anticipated risk. My jaw tightened. So that was it. David believed even if he lost everything publicly, his mother would hold the safety net. Offshore funds. Hidden assets. Enough to fund an escape. Enough to start over. Enough to run. He smiled because he thinks he can disappear, I said. Yes. I exhaled slowly. He underestimated one thing. Me. The next morning, I visited the detention center. I didn't dress like Regina this time. I wore something simpler. Neutral. Elegant. No diamonds. When they brought David into the visitation room, his arrogance had dimmed, but not vanished. His eyes locked on mine instantly. You look good, he said hoarsely. I didn't respond. He leaned forward, wrists chained to the table. You think this is over? He asked quietly. I know it is. He smirked slightly. You got me on the poison. Fine. I'll do time. But money? He tilted his head. Money always finds its way back. There it was. I held his gaze calmly. Tell me something, I said. Did you always plan to run? His eyes flickered. Just slightly. Bingo. You won't see a dime, he muttered instead. Oh, I won't? Silence stretched. I leaned closer. Your offshore account was flagged at 3 a.m., I said quietly. International Cooperation Treaty. Financial concealment during attempted homicide investigation. His smirk vanished. You're bluffing. Am I? His breathing changed. Faster. Your mother was detained this morning for questioning regarding money laundering. The color drained from his face. You involved my mother? He snapped. No, I corrected softly. You did. He slammed his cuffed hands against the table. You don't understand, he shouted. You were supposed to die. The guard stepped forward, warning him. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said calmly. I was. His shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked unsure. You ruined everything, he whispered. I studied him. No, I replied. I survived. There's a difference. They pulled him away shortly after. As he was escorted out, he turned back one last time. No smile this time. Just fear. But as I walked out of the detention center into the bright afternoon sun, Harrison approached with a serious expression. Chairwoman, he said quietly. There's been a development. What now? He hesitated. David requested a private meeting with the prosecutor. My stomach tightened slightly. For what? Harrison looked at me carefully. He says he has information that could destroy Sterling Medical Group. The wind shifted. For the first time in days, I felt the faintest crack in my control. Because if David had found something about the company, something about my grandfather's legacy, this war wasn't finished. And whatever card he was about to play, it was big enough that he believed it could still save him. I didn't panic. I wanted to. But panic is loud. Messy. Useless. Instead, I went straight to the executive boardroom at Sterling Medical Group. The long walnut table gleamed under recessed lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The place smelled faintly of leather and expensive coffee. My grandfather's portrait hung at the far end of the room. I stood beneath it. David thinks he has something. Harrison closed the door behind us. We've requested clarification from the prosecutor's office, he said. They confirmed Mr. Chin claims to possess documentation of systemic fraud and wrongful death concealment within Sterling. My pulse slowed instead of rising. That was specific. Too specific. Wrongful death? I asked carefully. Yes. I moved toward the head of the table and sat down slowly. The only death connected to Sterling that David could possibly twist was mine. But I hadn't officially died. There was no death certificate. Unless someone had attempted to process one. My mind snapped back to the hospital hallway. The nurse's voice. The administrator who barely looked at me when I begged for help. My credit card declining. The cold way they pushed me out. Pull all internal records from the night I was admitted, I said. Harrison nodded and began typing. Also, I added, cross-reference billing activity. Any attempted mortality coding under my name. 10 minutes later, the file appeared on the screen at the front of the room. Admission, kidney failure. Severe toxicity markers. Billing flag, payment declined. Administrative note, patient discharge, financial liability risk. Discharge? I never signed discharge papers. Scroll. Harrison's jaw tightened. There it was. Time of death, 2:14 a.m. My blood ran cold. They processed a death entry, he said quietly. But revoked it 6 minutes later. 6 minutes. Someone entered me as deceased. Then reversed it. Why? The answer felt ugly. Insurance pre-authorization. If I died, David would collect. But Sterling? They'd face scrutiny over releasing a critical patient for non-payment. So someone tried to log the death. Then realized the financial implications. And erased it. My hands curled slowly on the table. David must have accessed those records through Ashley. She handled back-end accounting before everything collapsed. He thought this proved malpractice. He thought he could trade corporate scandal for leniency. He wasn't entirely wrong. Hospitals do not log living patients as dead. Even for 6 minutes. Damage assessment? I asked calmly. Harrison met my eyes. If this becomes public without context, it will look like Sterling attempted to cover up a wrongful discharge. And did we? Silence. The truth settled heavily in the room. I wasn't chairwoman yet when it happened. But the system failed me. Because I was poor. Because my card declined. Because no one thought I mattered. And now that same system threatened to destroy everything my grandfather built. The irony almost made me laugh. David thought he had found a bomb. He didn't realize. I built my revenge on worse. Prepare a press statement, I said evenly. Harrison blinked. Public? Yes. He stared at me. Chairwoman, we could suppress. No. I stood. We do not bury this. If there's one thing I learned lying on that hospital floor, it's that silence protects the wrong people. David wanted to expose Sterling? Fine. We would expose it ourselves. On our terms. Schedule a press conference, I continued. Tomorrow morning. And what will you say? I looked at my grandfather's portrait one last time. The truth. Because if David believed he could destroy me by revealing what happened that night, he forgot one crucial detail. I survived it. And tomorrow? The entire city would find out exactly how. The press conference room filled up faster than any of us expected. By 8:45 a.m., every major local outlet had cameras lined up shoulder to shoulder. Reporters whispered over each other, scrolling through leaked fragments of David's claims. Wrongful death coding. Malpractice cover-up. Chairwoman personally involved? I walked in at exactly 9 a.m. No dramatic gown this time. Just a tailored navy suit. Minimal makeup. Hair down, natural. No Regina. Just me. Valerie Hayes. The irony wasn't lost on me, the woman they once labeled financial liability risk, now standing at the podium as chairwoman of the entire network. I adjusted the microphone. I'm not here to deny the hospital record, I began calmly. I'm here to confirm it. The room went dead silent. Cameras zoomed in. Yes, I continued. On the night I was admitted for acute kidney failure and toxic exposure, Sterling Medical Group processed a temporary death entry under my name. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was reversed 6 minutes later. Hands shot up, but I kept talking. What hasn't been reported is why. I let that hang. My credit card was declined. You could feel the shift. Billing flagged my case as a financial risk. I was discharged while still critically ill. A reporter stood up. Are you saying you were removed from care because you couldn't pay? Yes. No hesitation. Yes, I am. Murmurs erupted. I felt my heartbeat steady, grounded. This happened before I became chairwoman, I said. Before I knew who I really was. Before I had access to influence or protection. I swallowed carefully. I was alone. Married to a man who was poisoning me slowly. And when I finally collapsed, I was told I wasn't financially viable enough to save. There it was. The truth, naked and ugly. And when someone briefly entered me as deceased, I continued, it was not a cover-up of death. It was a system malfunction driven by profit logic and administrative panic. A reporter called out, is Mr. David Chin attempting to use this as leverage? Yes. No need to dance around it. He intends to present this as evidence of institutional fraud in exchange for reduced charges in his attempted homicide case. That statement hit like a bomb. Attempted homicide. Cameras flashed rapidly. I took a slow breath. I will not allow the system that failed me to hide behind legal smoke. I stepped away from the podium and signaled to the screen behind me. Internal documents appeared. Timestamps. Audit trails. Administrative memos. Full transparency. Sterling Medical Group will conduct a full independent investigation, I said. And I will personally fund a patient protection program to ensure no one is discharged based solely on billing flags again. The room was silent now, not scandal-hungry. Listening. Vulnerable. You can call this corporate accountability, I said softly. I call it survival. For a moment, emotion caught in my throat. Not weakness. Just memory. Cold tile floors. Fading vision. The taste of metal in my mouth. I lived, I finished. And because I lived, I get to fix it. No applause. Just stunned respect. As I stepped down from the stage, Harrison leaned close. The prosecutor's office just issued a statement, he murmured. And? They've declined David's offer. I didn't smile. But something warm settled in my chest. On what grounds? Insufficient leverage, Harrison said. And overwhelming evidence against him. David had tried to flip the board. But instead of detonating Sterling, he handed us the chance to rebuild it stronger. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. It was him. You think you're some kind of hero now? David's voice hissed through the line. I think I'm done being your victim. You destroyed my life. I looked out at the skyline beyond the glass wall. No, I said calmly. You tried to end mine. Silence. Then he laughed bitterly. You really think you've won? I didn't respond immediately. Because winning doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like quiet clarity. Yes, I said softly. And for the first time, I meant it. But 3 days later, I would receive a court document that made my stomach drop. Because David wasn't finished. He was pleading not guilty. And demanding a full trial. When Harrison told me David was pleading not guilty, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so predictable. Of course he was. David had always believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room. Smarter than me. Smarter than the police. Smarter than the system. A full trial meant spectacle. It meant attention. And attention was oxygen to him. He's claiming the poisoning was accidental, Harrison said as we sat in my office, late afternoon sun stretching across the floor. He says the herbal powder was a traditional supplement he ordered online. Contamination, not intent. Contamination, I repeated flatly. He also claims the audio recording from the gala was edited out of context. I leaned back in my chair. And the knife? Emotional distress, Harrison replied dryly. He says he panicked after being publicly defamed. Of course he did. Every abusive man's favorite word, panic. As if panic magically erases months of arsenic in someone's bloodstream. What's the prosecution's position? I asked. They're confident. The lab results are clear. Chronic exposure over time. Text messages recovered from Ashley's phone referencing dosage. That word still made my skin crawl. Dosage. Like I was some lab experiment. But trials are unpredictable. Juries are unpredictable. All it takes is one sympathetic face and a halfway decent defense attorney to muddy clear water. And David's lawyer? Was very decent. That night, alone in my penthouse kitchen, I found myself staring at a mug of tea. Chamomile. The smell alone made my stomach tighten. 5 years of routine. He'd bring it to me almost every night while I answered emails at our tiny dining table. You work too hard, he'd say softly. God. The performance. I set the mug down untouched. For a second, doubt crept in. What if the jury believes him? What if they see a stressed husband drowning in debt instead of a calculated predator? I hated that thought. Not because I feared losing. But because I feared being minimized again. Reduced to misunderstanding. The next morning, I met with the lead prosecutor. She was sharp. Mid-40s. No-nonsense energy. He's going to try to paint you as unstable, she said bluntly. Financial pressure. Marital stress. Possible self-harm angle. I felt heat rise in my chest. Self-harm? He'll imply you poisoned yourself. Or exaggerated symptoms for leverage. I actually laughed this time, sharp and humorless. That's insane. It doesn't have to be sane, she replied calmly. It just has to create doubt. Silence settled between us. Then she leaned forward. Juries respond to story, she said. Not spreadsheets. I understood what she meant. Evidence matters. But narrative wins. So we built mine carefully. Medical timeline charts. Forensic toxicology. Text messages. Financial motives. But also photos of me in that hospital bed. My lab results. The visible decline in my health over months. And the most powerful piece? A short video clip Harrison had recovered from our old apartment security camera. David in the kitchen. Late at night. Opening the cabinet. Pouring something into a glass jar. Looking around before sealing it. It wasn't crystal clear. But it was enough. When I saw it for the first time, my hands shook. Not from fear. From confirmation. He hadn't snapped. He hadn't panicked. He had planned. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Plenty of time for media build-up. Plenty of time for public opinion to swirl. And David? He gave his first jailhouse interview 3 days later. Headline. Wrongfully accused husband claims corporate conspiracy. I read the article twice. He claimed I faked illness to escape debt. He claimed Sterling used him as a scapegoat. He claimed I reinvented myself and staged everything for control. It was almost impressive. The delusion. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I didn't answer this time. Instead, a voicemail came through. His voice. Soft. Measured. You always underestimated me, Val, he said. Court is different from a ballroom. I deleted it. But I couldn't shake one thought. He wasn't trying to win legally. He was trying to win psychologically. And trials? They don't just test evidence. They test endurance. If he thought I'd crumble under cross-examination. If he thought dragging our marriage through public dissection would break me. He forgot something crucial. I've already survived dying. A courtroom? That's just another room. Still. As the trial countdown began, I couldn't ignore the weight pressing quietly against my ribs. Because once you step into court, you don't control the narrative anymore. And David? Was betting everything on that fact. The courtroom smelled like old paper and disinfectant. It was smaller than I expected. Less dramatic than TV. No sweeping music. No glamorous lighting. Just wooden benches, muted whispers, and the steady hum of fluorescent bulbs. David sat at the defense table in a navy suit that didn't quite fit right anymore. He'd lost weight. Jail had stripped some polish off him. But not the confidence. When I walked in, every head turned. Not because I was chairwoman. Because I was the wife. The one who didn't die. He looked at me like we were about to attend couples therapy instead of an attempted murder trial. That almost made me laugh. The prosecution opened strong. Clean timeline. Medical reports. Toxicology charts. Repeated low-dose arsenic exposure over 5 months. 5 months. Sitting across from him at dinner. 5 months of slow decay. When they played the kitchen security footage, the room leaned forward collectively. There he was. Opening the cabinet. Unscrewing the jar. Pouring. The defense attorney stood smoothly when it was their turn. Circumstantial, he said calmly. No direct visual confirmation of substance. Then came David's version. He testified on day 3. I loved my wife, he said, voice breaking just enough. She was sick for a long time. We were drowning in medical bills. I tried herbal remedies because I was desperate. Desperate. There was that word again. He looked at the jury with wounded eyes. She pushed me away emotionally. She didn't trust me. She thought I was cheating. Murmurs. She accused me constantly. She was unstable. There it was. The pivot. Make her dramatic. Paranoid. Emotional. Classic. I kept my face neutral. Inside, though, I felt something different than anger. Clarity. Because listening to him lie publicly removed the last thread of nostalgia. There was nothing left to grieve. When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom felt colder. I took the oath. Sat down. Adjusted the microphone. The prosecutor kept it straightforward. Mrs. Hayes, did you knowingly ingest arsenic? No. Did your husband prepare your nightly tea? Yes. Did your health decline over time? Yes. Then the defense stood. He smiled politely. Mrs. Hayes, he began, you became chairwoman of Sterling shortly after this incident, correct? Yes. And your financial status improved significantly? Yes. So isn't it true that your husband's incarceration benefits you financially? I didn't blink. No. He paced slowly. You stand to gain complete control of shared assets. He signed them over voluntarily when he accepted my investment. Under an alias. Yes. So you manipulated him financially? No. I invested in a company he pitched. While hiding your identity? Yes. Why? Because I needed leverage. But I answered calmly. Because he thought I was dead. The courtroom shifted. The attorney tried another angle. Isn't it possible you exaggerated symptoms to escape debt and marital stress? There it was. The self-harm insinuation. I leaned slightly toward the microphone. If I wanted to escape debt, I said evenly, I wouldn't have stayed up nights calculating which bill to pay first. Silence. If I wanted to escape my marriage, I continued, I wouldn't have begged him to go to counseling. The attorney's smile thinned. You're very composed, he observed. I almost died, I replied. Composure comes with perspective. A faint ripple of approval moved through the gallery. The final blow came unexpectedly. The prosecution called Ashley. I hadn't known they would. She walked in pale, avoiding David's eyes. Under oath, she admitted he'd searched arsenic purchase limits online. Admitted he texted her about increasing dosage gradually. David's jaw clenched visibly. When court adjourned that afternoon, the jury didn't look confused. They looked disturbed. David caught my eye as deputies led him out. No smirk this time. No confidence. Just calculation fading into something closer to realization. Still. Trials don't end on feelings. They end on verdicts. And verdicts can surprise you. The jury began deliberations the next morning. I waited in a quiet side room, staring at my phone, trying not to replay every answer I'd given. Harrison stood near the window, calm as ever. It won't take long, he said. How do you know? He glanced back at me. Because truth doesn't require discussion. I wanted to believe that. But when the courtroom doors opened 2 hours later, my heart still felt like it might punch straight through my ribs. The jury had reached a verdict. And everything was about to lock into place. The courtroom felt smaller when we filed back in. Like the walls had leaned closer overnight just to watch. David sat straighter than he had all week. His jaw tight. Hands folded. Trying to look controlled. But I saw it. That tremor in his fingers. The jury filed in. No one smiled. The forewoman held the envelope like it weighed 50 pounds. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree. My pulse roared in my ears. We find the defendant. A pause that stretched so long it felt cruel. Guilty. The air left the room all at once. David didn't react immediately. Like his brain lagged behind the word. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Guilty. On the charge of financial fraud. Guilty. Each word hit like a hammer sealing a coffin. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just breathed. Slow. Steady. Because this wasn't triumph. It was confirmation. David turned toward me as deputies moved closer. His eyes were wide now. Not angry. Panicked. This isn't over, he muttered. But it was. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge didn't mince words. Mr. Chen, she said, your actions demonstrate prolonged premeditation and profound disregard for human life. She sentenced him to 22 years. 22. He'd be in his 50s before he walked free. If he walked free. As they led him away, he didn't look at me. Not once. The fight had drained out of him. And for the first time since this began. He looked small. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed again. Reporters shouted questions. How do you feel? Do you forgive him? Is this closure? Closure. I hate that word. Closure implies something neat. Wrapped. Finished. This wasn't neat. It was survival. I feel grateful, I said simply. For what? For being alive. That answer seemed to confuse them. But it was true. Back at Sterling, the reforms we announced were already in motion. Billing safeguards restructured. Mandatory care holds for critical patients. Independent patient advocates assigned to high-risk cases. The board voted unanimously to formalize the protection program under a new name. The Hayes Initiative. I didn't ask for that. But I didn't refuse it either. Because if my almost death could prevent someone else's, then it meant something. That night, alone in my penthouse, I did something small. I made tea. Not because I wanted it. Because I needed to. I opened a brand new box. Sealed. Watched the water boil. Poured it myself. The smell rose gently. No fear. No metallic aftertaste. Just chamomile. I took a sip. And nothing happened. No dizziness. No nausea. No betrayal. Just warmth. And that's when it hit me. Revenge had been fuel. Justice had been necessary. But peace? Peace was quiet. It was ordinary. It was drinking tea without suspicion. My phone buzzed softly. A notification from the Department of Corrections. Inmate Chen had requested to send a letter. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then declined it. I didn't need his words. I had my verdict. I had my life. And for the first time in years, I had my future. But 3 days later, Harrison walked into my office with a look I hadn't seen since the night of the gala. Serious. Measured. Chairwoman, he said quietly. There's one final matter we need to address. I set my tea down. What now? He placed a folder on my desk. Your life insurance policy. I frowned slightly. What about it? It was never cancelled. And suddenly, this story wasn't entirely finished. I stared at the folder for a long time before opening it. My life insurance policy, I repeated slowly. David was the primary beneficiary. Yes, Harrison said. And the policy remains active. I felt a cold ripple down my spine. That doesn't make sense. Once he was arrested, it doesn't automatically void, Harrison explained. Conviction impacts payout eligibility. But the policy itself? Still valid. I opened the folder. There it was. $20 million. Issued 5 years ago. Right after we got married. Back when I thought it was romantic that he wanted to protect our future. I almost laughed. Protect. What's the issue? I asked. Harrison hesitated. 3 days before your hospitalization, there was a request submitted to increase the coverage. My fingers froze on the paper. Increase it to what? 30 million. The room felt suddenly smaller. And it was approved? Yes. Of course it was. David had timed everything. The dosage. The hospital discharge. The coverage increase. He hadn't just planned to kill me. He'd optimized the return. I closed the folder slowly. So why is this a problem now? I asked. Harrison met my eyes. Because under state law, if the beneficiary is disqualified due to criminal conviction, the payout transfers to the secondary beneficiary. And who is that? He slid a single sheet across the desk. I read the name twice before it registered. Ashley Lynn. I felt heat crawl up my neck. You're telling me, I said evenly, that if I had died, she would have received $30 million? Yes. My mind recalibrated rapidly. That explained everything. Why she stayed. Why she deleted files. Why she risked perjury before turning state's witness. She wasn't just a mistress. She was insurance. I leaned back in my chair. Can she still claim anything? No, Harrison replied. Slayer statute blocks payout if death results from criminal act tied to beneficiary conspiracy. And since I didn't die? The policy remains intact. You may reassign it. I let out a slow breath. The absurdity of it all pressed in. A price tag on my existence. $30 million. That's what he thought I was worth. Not my laugh. Not my loyalty. Not 5 years of shared struggle. 30 million. I stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, indifferent and alive. When do we renew? I asked. It's annual. Next review in 2 months. Cancel it. Harrison paused. Chairwoman, from a strategic standpoint. I don't want a price on my head, I said quietly. He nodded. Understood. As he gathered the documents, I asked one more question. Did David know about the secondary transfer rule? Yes. So he believed even if he got caught, she'd still be paid. Yes. I smiled faintly. He really did think he'd covered every angle. But he hadn't. Because he underestimated something fundamental. I don't die easily. That night, I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove myself to the old apartment building. It had already been cleared out. Sold. Dark windows stared back at me. I climbed the stairs slowly. Unlocked the empty unit with the management key. The space echoed. No furniture. No dishes. No memories left to trip over. I walked into the kitchen. Stood where the cabinet used to hang. Where the jar once sat. Where he'd measured my decline in teaspoons. I placed my palm against the wall. I survived you, I whispered softly. And I meant more than the poisoning. I meant the belittling. The gaslighting. The slow erosion of self-worth. All of it. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. I almost ignored it. But something told me not to. I answered. A female voice this time. Low. Tense. It's Ashley. I didn't speak. I need to meet you, she said quickly. There's something you don't know. My grip tightened on the phone. I testified, she rushed on. But that wasn't everything. A pause. There's another account. The empty apartment suddenly felt colder. Another account? I repeated. Yes, she whispered. And it's not in David's name. I didn't meet Ashley in my office. And I definitely didn't meet her anywhere predictable. We chose a quiet cafe in a residential neighborhood 20 minutes outside the city. No press. No board members. No familiar faces. She looked different. Thinner. Pale. Not the polished assistant who used to hover behind David with that tight little smile. This version of Ashley looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in months. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. "You look alive," she said softly. "I am." Silence settled between us. "Talk," I said. She nodded quickly, like she'd rehearsed this. "The offshore account you froze?" "That wasn't the only one." I didn't react outwardly. "There's a domestic trust," she continued. "Set up under a Shell LLC 6 months ago." My stomach tightened. "Whose name?" "Not David's." She swallowed. "Yours." For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard her. "Excuse me?" "He created a revocable trust listing you as primary owner. It's structured to activate in the event of his incarceration." I stared at her. "How much?" "Just under 4 million. That number sat differently than 30 million. This wasn't a kill payout. This was contingency money." "Why would he put money in my name?" I asked slowly. Ashley's eyes flickered. "Because he didn't think he'd lose." I said nothing. "He told me once," she whispered, "that if something went wrong, you'd forgive him." I almost laughed. But there was no humor in it. "He believed," she continued carefully, "that you loved him enough to wait." Wait. For prison. For release. For reunion. He thought if he secured money for you, you'd see it as proof he cared. The arrogance of that logic almost stunned me. "He poisoned me." "I know. And he thought $4 million would fix that?" Ashley looked down. "He said you were sentimental. That you just needed time." Sentimental. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger. Not even disgust. Just clarity. "He misunderstood me," I said calmly. Ashley nodded faintly. "There's more," she added. Of course there was. "He named the trust something specific." "What?" She hesitated. "Second chance." I exhaled slowly. There it was. David's final delusion. Not escape. Not leverage. Redemption. He hadn't just wanted to kill me for insurance money. He wanted options. If I died, he profited. If I lived, he bought forgiveness. Win-win. In his mind. I sat back in my chair. "And you're telling me this because?" Ashley's composure cracked slightly. "Because I don't want to be tied to him anymore." I testified for immunity, but I kept quiet about the trust because I didn't understand it. "And now?" "Now I do." I studied her carefully. She wasn't defending him. She wasn't protecting herself. She looked tired. "I'll verify it," I said finally. "You will," she replied. "It's real." We sat there for another minute in silence. Then she asked something unexpected. "Do you hate me?" I considered that honestly. "No," I said. She blinked. "I don't hate you," I continued. "I almost died because I loved the wrong person. That's not your burden to carry." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded quickly and stood to leave. When she was gone, I stayed seated for a long time. Second chance. I thought about that empty apartment. The hospital hallway. The gala stage. The courtroom. David never really understood what survival does to someone. It doesn't make you sentimental. It makes you precise. Later that week, Harrison confirmed the trust. $4 million. Untouched. Fully legal. What would you like to do with it? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Transfer every cent to the Hayes Initiative. He nodded. No conditions? 1, I said. Rename it. To what? I allowed myself a small, steady smile. First chance. Because here's the truth. I don't need a second chance with a man who tried to erase me. But someone else? Some woman sitting in a hospital hallway right now, being told she's not financially viable? She deserves a first one. David built contingencies. I built change. He calculated profit. I calculated survival. And in the end? Only one of us gets to wake up free tomorrow. And it's not him.